Damon Miller had just hung up the 10th black wool coat of the night when his 7-year-old daughter's voice echoed in his head, "Don't forget to bring home a cupcake, Daddy." He glanced at the towering dessert table in the ballroom, just barely visible from his perch at the coat check station near the entrance of the Grand Lexington Hotel. He adjusted his cheap black tie, ignored the blister forming on his heel, and forced a smile as another guest handed him a fur stole. It was supposed to be a one-night gig. Damon, once managing a small construction crew, had been out of steady work for months after his business folded. Now, with rent overdue and his daughter Ellie's school trip coming up, he'd taken whatever he could get, including this job, standing by racks of designer coats at a high society charity gala. The rich walked in like they owned the world. Maybe they did. Then she walked in. She wasn't what he expected. No dramatic gown, no entourage, no air of superiority. Just a sleek navy dress, her dark hair twisted effortlessly up, and those eyes sharp, curious, and locked on him like she saw something more than a man behind a coat rack. "Cold tonight," she said, slipping off her coat and handing it to him. Damon blinked. Yeah, feels like winter's trying to prove a point." She smiled, really smiled, and Damon felt it like a jolt. Her laugh came easy, warm. "You from the city, born and raised in Queens," he said, hanging her coat carefully. "And you?" She hesitated. "Brooklyn, actually," he nodded. "Nice to meet someone else who doesn't live in a penthouse." That made her laugh again, but there was something unreadable behind it. "I'm Audrey," she said, offering her hand, which he took without thinking. Damon. Her grip was strong, confident. She held his gaze for an extra second. Then someone called her name from inside the ballroom, and she gave him one last look before disappearing into the glitter and gold of the gala. He stood there for a moment, heart racing for no good reason. "Snap out of it," he muttered to himself, moving to collect another coat. But Audrey Patterson didn't disappear from his mind. Inside, Audrey's assistant was already whispering about board members and brand partnerships, but Audrey's thoughts were still at the coat check. She hadn't meant to talk to him. She never did this initiate small talk with strangers. But something about Damon felt real, and that was rare in her world. As CEO of Patterson Lux Holdings, Audrey had spent the last 3 years surrounded by power suits and polished lies, but Damon had looked her in the eye without knowing who she was. He hadn't flinched, hadn't pretended. That mattered more than she wanted to admit. Back at the coat check, the hours dragged. Damon checked his phone once Ellie was safe with Mrs. Rivera, their neighbor, who always sat with her when he had to work nights. He'd promised her pancakes in the morning. By the time the gala wound down, Damon's feet were numb and his patience thin. The music faded, and one by one, the wealthy said their goodbyes, and then she came back. "Audrey." "Hey," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Still here?" "Yeah, coat check never sleeps," she smiled. "You get a break." "Not really, but I stole 2 shrimp skewers earlier, so I'm surviving." She laughed again and pulled something from her purse. "Here." He looked at the small white box she offered. "I saw you eyeing the dessert table," she said. "These are the cupcakes." "Thought you might want one." Damon stared at her, stunned. "You got me a cupcake?" "Well, technically 2. One has a little gold leaf on it. Fancy." He took the box slowly. "Thank you, seriously." "Is it for you?" she asked, tilting her head. "No," he said, softening. "My daughter." "She asked for one before I left." Her face changed just slightly. "You're a dad." "Yeah, Ellie, she's 7. Got more attitude than any person her size should." Audrey's gaze warmed. "I like that." He hesitated. "You got kids?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "But maybe someday." There was a beat of silence between them. Then she spoke again. "Do you work here full-time?" He chuckled. "Nah, I'm just doing this gig to cover some bills. I used to run a renovation business, but things went bad last year. Now I do what I can." She looked like she wanted to say something more, but instead nodded. "Well," she said, slipping her coat on, "if you ever get back into renovations, maybe I'll be your first client." He raised an eyebrow. "You own a place?" Something like that. She moved to leave, then paused. "It was really nice talking to you, Damon." "You too, Audrey." She disappeared into the night, but this time Damon couldn't stop smiling. Back inside her limo, Audrey stared out the window, biting her lip. Her assistant leaned forward. "Everything okay?" Audrey didn't look at her. "I think I just met someone." The next morning, Damon made pancakes for Ellie and gave her the cupcake. She squealed in delight and hugged him tight. "Did you get to talk to rich people?" she asked, her mouth full of frosting. "Just one," he said with a smile, "but she was different." Ellie tilted her head. "Like different good?" "Yeah," he said quietly. "Different good." What Damon couldn't have known was that Audrey Patterson, CEO of one of the largest lifestyle brands in the country, was already rearranging her schedule. Because she wasn't just intrigued, she was falling, and she didn't plan on walking away. 2 days later, Damon was elbow-deep in a leaky pipe under Mrs. Rivera's kitchen sink when he heard a knock at the front door. "Ellie, sweetie, don't open it, okay?" he called out, his voice muffled by the cabinet. "I'm not," she shouted from the couch, where she was coloring mermaids onto the last page of her sketchbook. Mrs. Rivera shuffled over, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'll get it." Damon tightened the last fitting, twisted the wrench one more turn, and slid out just in time to hear the sound that made his stomach drop. High heels on tile. "Sorry to bother," a familiar voice began and then stopped. Damon stood, knocking his head against the underside of the sink before straightening fully. Audrey stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable, a small envelope in one hand. His shirt was stained with rust and water, his hair a mess. She looked like she'd just walked out of a photo shoot, tailored coat, slim black slacks, and the smallest diamond studs he'd ever seen. "Oh," she said, blinking. "I didn't mean to interrupt." What are you doing here?" Damon asked, too stunned to soften the question. "Mrs. Rivera glanced between them, eyes narrowing with curiosity before she slipped away toward the back, muttering something about her tea kettle. Audrey held out the envelope. "I couldn't stop thinking about what you said, about your renovation business. I might have something for you." He hesitated. "How'd you even find me? You gave your name, and I know people who find things. It wasn't hard." "Right," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Of course." She stepped inside, her gaze flicking to Ellie, who waved with a crayon in her hand. "Hi," Audrey said warmly. "That's Ellie," Damon said quickly. "My daughter." "I figured," she said softly. "She's got your eyes." Ellie beamed. "Are you Daddy's friend?" Audrey glanced at Damon, waiting. He cleared his throat. "Yeah, she's a friend," Audrey smiled. "That's right." Ellie nodded, satisfied, and returned to her drawing. Damon took the envelope. "What is this?" "A property I own," she said. "It's been sitting unused for a year. I need someone to assess repairs, make a plan." "I thought of you." "I didn't bring up work to get something," he said, voice low. "I know," she replied. "That's why I trust you." He opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a set of keys and an address across the river in Tribeca. "That's prime real estate," he said before he could stop himself. "I'm aware," Audrey replied. "I bought it before prices exploded. I was going to turn it into a design studio, but things got busy." He looked at her, uncertain. "You're serious?" "I don't play around when it comes to business." He hesitated. "If I take this job, I'd need to bring on a few guys, materials. It wouldn't be cheap." "I'm not asking you to work for free, Damon," she said gently. "Do the walk through. Give me an estimate. If it's a fit, we'll move forward. If not, no hard feelings." He nodded slowly. "Okay," she smiled, then crouched next to Ellie. "What are you drawing?" "A sea dragon," Ellie said proudly. "It's guarding a ship full of treasure." Audrey admired the picture. "Looks like she's winning." "She's a girl dragon," Ellie said matter-of-factly. "She always wins." Audrey looked up at Damon. "She's amazing." "She is," he said, his voice catching just slightly. Audrey stood. "I'll let you get back to plumbing." "Temporary fix," he said. "Mrs. Rivera's pipes are older than either of us." She stepped toward the door but paused. "I'm glad I stopped by." He met her eyes. "Me too." He walked her out, the cold air biting as they stood on the stoop. "I meant what I said," she told him. "This isn't a favor. I think you're better than half the contractors I've worked with." "You haven't seen my work yet," he said. "I trust my instincts." Before he could respond, she added, "And Damon, I didn't come just for business." He stilled. "I don't know what this is," she continued, "but I'd like to find out." He swallowed. "I'm not exactly in a good place for whatever this might be." "Neither am I," she said. "But maybe the timing doesn't have to be perfect." He looked at her for a long moment. "I'll check out the place tomorrow." She gave him a small nod. "I'll meet you there." As she walked away, Damon felt something shift, a door opening, one he hadn't expected. Back inside, Ellie peered up at him. "Is she your girlfriend?" he laughed. "No, Peanut, she's just someone I'm getting to know." "She likes you," Ellie said confidently, turning back to her dragons. "She brought keys. That's like a secret treasure map." Damon stared at the envelope in his hand. Maybe it was. The next morning, he stood outside the Tribeca address, stunned. The building was 3 stories of brick and glass, tucked between a high-end gallery and a boutique that sold scarves for more than he made in a week. Audrey arrived in a town car, stepping out in jeans and sneakers. "Didn't expect that," he said. "Thought I'd dress for construction," she replied lightly. He unlocked the front door and they stepped inside. It was dusty, echoing with the hollow sound of disuse, but the bones were strong. High ceilings. Original beams, potential. She watched him as he moved through the space, tapping on walls, checking outlets. "You've done this before," she said. "A lot," he replied. "You weren't kidding. This place has good bones." "So do you," she said quietly. He looked up, surprised, and she shrugged. "I meant that," he cleared his throat. "I'll write up an estimate by the end of the week." "Take your time," she said, "but not too much." They stood in the middle of the space, sunlight streaming through the tall windows. "I should warn you," he said. "Working with me isn't glamorous." "I'm not looking for glamorous," she replied. He met her gaze. "Then maybe we're both in the right place." Audrey's phone buzzed and she glanced at it with a sigh. "I have to go, board meeting." "Of course." She looked at him one last time. "Thank you for not pretending." "I don't know how to be anyone else." "Good," she said, "because that's exactly who I want." She left him standing there, surrounded by dust and light and possibilities, and for the first time in months, Damon felt something unexpected: hope. Damon paced the length of the unfinished loft, blueprints spread messily across a folding table he'd hauled in himself. Sunlight poured through the massive front windows, illuminating the dust dancing in the air. He adjusted the collar of his work shirt, still damp from the morning's labor, and glanced at the clock. She was late. He wasn't sure why it mattered, except it did. Audrey eventually arrived with a man trailing behind her. Mid-40s, dressed in a crisp gray suit and a designer coat that probably cost more than Damon's truck. His eyes swept the loft with immediate judgment. "Damon," Audrey said, her tone light but cautious. "This is Marcus Lang. He's on our corporate legal team." Marcus didn't offer his hand. "I assume you're the contractor Audrey mentioned." Damon held his gaze calm. "That's right." Marcus gave a nod that barely counted as acknowledgement. "We'll need full liability coverage, proof of licensing, and a work timeline. If you can submit that to my office by Friday, we'll proceed." Damon's jaw tightened. "Already prepared, you'll have everything by tonight." "Good," Marcus replied, then turned toward Audrey. "We have to be at the Midtown office by noon. The Paris execs moved the call." Audrey glanced at Damon. "Can I have a minute?" Marcus hesitated, then stepped outside, pulling out his phone as the door closed behind him. "What was that?" Damon asked once they were alone. "He's cautious," she said, "and territorial. He doesn't like when I make decisions without his input." "You told him I was handling this." "Of course," she said. "I don't take you on halfway." He leaned against the table. "He thinks I'm a risk. He thinks anything he doesn't control is a risk." She stepped closer. "I don't need his permission." "You sure about that?" His voice was low, unsure. "Because the way he looked at me, like I was a stray dog that wandered into a gallery." She reached for one of the blueprints. "You've got talent. I don't care what anyone else sees." He searched her face. "Why are you doing this?" "What do you mean, this building?" "Me, all of it. You don't owe me anything." "I didn't offer this because I owe you," she said. "I offered it because I believe in you." He shook his head. "You barely know me." "I know enough." He stepped forward, close enough to catch the faint scent of her perfume, clean, subtle, not the kind of thing you'd expect from a billionaire. "You're used to people jumping when you say their name. I'm not one of them." "Good," she said. "I don't want someone who jumps. I want someone who stands." He went still. "You think you're hiding," she continued. "But you're not from me." He swallowed hard. "You don't make things easy." She smiled, just slightly. "Wasn't planning to." Outside, Marcus knocked once, then opened the door. "Audrey, we really do need to go." She turned to Damon. "I'll stop by again this weekend. We can go over the design plan together." "I'll be here." She paused, then touched his forearm briefly before walking out. Damon exhaled once the door shut behind her, his pulse still racing. That night he sat at the kitchen table with Ellie, the blueprints laid out beside her crayons. "Is this the Dragon Cave?" she asked, tapping one of the floor plans. "No," he said, smiling. "That's a skylight," she tilted her head, "but it could be a dragon cave." "I guess it could," she colored in the lines. "Is the fancy lady going to live there?" "No," he said softly. "She just owns it." "Are you going to marry her?" He choked on his coffee. "What? No." "That's not where did you even?" She looked at you like mom used to, when she thought you were funny but didn't want to say it. His heart clenched. "Go brush your teeth." She slid off the chair, grinning, and skipped down the hallway. When Saturday came, Audrey showed up in jeans again, this time with a camera slung over her shoulder and 2 iced coffees balanced in a drink carrier. "Thought you might need fuel," she said, handing him one. "Appreciate it." They walked the space together, Audrey taking pictures from odd angles, Damon explaining how he planned to bring in reclaimed wood for the ceiling beams and restore the original brick behind the drywall. "I want it to feel alive," she said as they stood in the center of the main room. "It will." Their conversation flowed easily, shifting from finishes to architecture to art, but as they stood near the window, the mood shifted. "You and Marcus," Damon said carefully. "Is there more there?" She looked surprised. "No, God, no, he's all business, and before that, anyone else," she hesitated. "I was engaged once, years ago, didn't end well." He waited, but she didn't elaborate. "What about you?" she asked. "I was married." Her eyes widened slightly. "I didn't know. She died when Ellie was 2, car accident, I don't talk about it much." Her fingers brushed his, intentional this time. "I'm sorry, me too." They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the city faint through the glass. "I've been so focused on keeping things running," he said. "Sometimes I forget what it's like to feel something unexpected." She looked up at him. "And now," he didn't answer. Instead, he leaned in, slow, deliberate. She didn't stop him. Her lips were soft and certain, her hand finding his without hesitation. When they finally pulled away, she whispered, "That's going to complicate things." He exhaled. "Yeah, I don't care." Neither did he. By Monday, the crew was in place. Damon had called in favors, hired 2 former employees, and begun demolition. Audrey stopped by every other day, never interrupting, just observing, sometimes bringing pastries for the crew, sometimes staying to talk with Damon alone. One night she walked in just after sunset, the space bathed in amber light, and found him adjusting a beam near the back wall. "You're here late," she said. "Could say the same." She pulled off her coat. "I needed a break from the office. Figured I'd spend it somewhere that doesn't smell like recycled air and tension." "You picked the right place." He reached for a bucket of tools, and she moved to help, brushing his arm as she passed. The electricity between them was unspoken but constant. A thread pulled tight, waiting for the moment it would snap. "I've been thinking," she said. "Dangerous." She smiled. "We should host the launch party right here once it's done." He raised an eyebrow. "You serious?" "A night market vibe," she said. "Open bar, string lights, music echoing off the beams you restored. Think about it. Your work. On display. People need to see what you can do." He considered it. "Wouldn't be a bad way to open the place. It'd be the perfect way." He looked at her for a long moment. "You're not afraid of making waves, are you?" "I make them on purpose," she said. This time, when she leaned in to kiss him, he didn't hesitate. Neither did she. The loft smelled of sawdust, paint, and possibility. Damon stood near the entrance, tightening the last bolt on a custom shelving unit he'd built by hand. The soft echo of footsteps on polished floors drew his attention just as Audrey stepped inside. She wore a flowing ivory blouse tucked into tailored tan trousers, her hair down for the first time since they met. The sight of her like this relaxed, open made something shift in him. "Everything's ready," he said, voice low from exhaustion, pride, and something else he couldn't quite name. Her eyes swept the space slowly. Edison bulbs hung in gentle loops across the ceiling, casting a golden glow over the exposed brick and warm wood accents. The room had transformed from a hollow shell into something alive, something that carried both their fingerprints. "It's perfect," she said softly. "You haven't seen the rooftop." She followed him up the narrow back stairwell. When the door opened, the city sprawled beneath them, lights flickering like stars. A low wooden deck fanned out across the roof, surrounded by glass panels. In the center, a long table was set with dark linen and flickering candles. At one end stood an open bar framed with string lights. The wind swept Audrey's hair across her shoulders. "You did this," she asked, "last week." "I wanted the launch to start up here." She turned toward him, hands in her pockets. "You didn't have to. I wanted to do something that felt like us, not the version of you people expect, the real one." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she said, "There's something I need to tell you." His shoulders tensed. "All right. My father didn't build Patterson Lux, I did. He started the company, yes, but he stepped down when I was 25. I rebuilt it after he nearly ran it into the ground. People still treat me like I inherited everything, but I fought for every inch." He didn't interrupt. "I wasn't born into this life the way they think," she continued. "We had money, sure, but I know what it means to be dismissed in rooms where I had every right to stand. I see the way you look at the people I work with like they breathe a different kind of air, but I've choked on it too." Damon watched her, the wind tugging at her sleeves. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't want to be on opposite sides of a glass wall with you. I want you to know I've been where you are, not in the same way, but enough to understand what it means to be underestimated." He stepped closer. "I haven't been fair to you. I boxed you in with them, but you've never treated me like I didn't belong. You've only ever pulled me forward. I'm not interested in building something with someone who only wants to be rescued," she said. "But I'll stand next to someone who's already standing." He reached for her hand. "I'm not going anywhere." The rooftop door opened behind them and Marcus stepped out, pausing when he saw their hands. "The guests are arriving," he said. "Press is downstairs." Audrey didn't let go. "Let them wait." Marcus blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said they can wait." She turned to Damon. "You ready?" He nodded. Inside, the space filled quickly. Designers, investors, journalists, they all flowed through the restored loft, admiring the reclaimed wood, the custom lighting, the pieces Damon had built with his own hands. Audrey kept her distance for a while, letting him take the spotlight. People asked him questions, took photos with him, handed him cards with embossed logos. Later, near the bar, she approached him again. "You're a hit. I'm still waiting for someone to ask me to hang a coat," she laughed quietly. "That man's long gone." He looked around. "You didn't have to put my name on the plaque by the door. I wanted everyone to know who brought this place to life." He leaned in. "You've changed everything for me." She shook her head. "You did that yourself. I just showed up." As the evening wound down, Ellie arrived with Mrs. Rivera. Audrey had insisted on inviting them. Ellie ran straight to Damon, still in her school uniform, and threw her arms around his waist. "Daddy." "Is this the Dragon Cave?" He lifted her up. "Close. This is where the dragons come to celebrate." Audrey approached with a small gift bag and knelt. "Hi, Ellie." The girl smiled shyly. "Hi, I brought you something." Audrey handed her the bag. Inside was a hardcover art book titled Women Who Rule Myth and Legend. Ellie's eyes went wide. "Can I read it tonight?" "Only if your dad says yes." Damon looked at Audrey. "You didn't have to, I know." Marcus reappeared, clearing his throat. "Audrey, they're asking for a closing toast." She turned to Damon. "Come with me. I'm not exactly the toasting type. Doesn't matter, you're part of this." They stood together in front of the crowd, glasses raised. Audrey spoke first, thanking the team, the partners, the supporters. Then she paused. "There's someone I need to thank especially, someone who reminded me what it means to build with heart. Damon Miller." The crowd applauded. Damon looked uncomfortable, but Audrey reached for his hand and held it high. After the speeches, as guests began to leave and Ellie curled up in a corner with her book, Damon and Audrey stepped outside into the cool night. "Is this real?" he asked, voice low. She slid her hand into his. "You tell me." He looked at her, really looked, and realized this wasn't a detour in his life. It was the beginning of something whole. "You ever think about what happens next?" he asked. "All the time. I mean after this. After the dust settles and the lights go out. I think we figure it out together." He pulled her close, the city stretching quiet and endless behind them. "I love you," he said, no hesitation. She didn't blink. "I love you too." Ellie called for him then, and as he walked back to her with Audrey by his side, he realized he hadn't just found a partner, he'd found a future. Damon sat on the edge of the rooftop deck. legs dangling over the side, watching Ellie teach Audrey how to shuffle a deck of cards like a magician. It was past 8, the city buzzing below them, but the three of them had stayed after the party ended, reluctant to leave the place that had become more than a project, more than just a renovated loft. It had become home. Audrey fumbled a cascade shuffle and sent a few cards flying. Ellie burst into laughter and dove to catch one, clutching it like a trophy. "Okay, I give up," Audrey said, throwing her hands in the air. "You win, card queen." "I always win," Ellie said proudly, plopping down beside Damon. "Right, Dad?" He ruffled her curls. "Only because you cheat." Audrey sat beside him on the other side, her knees brushing his. "It's wild how fast this place came together." "It's not just the place," Damon said, glancing between the two of them. "It's everything." Audrey nodded slowly. "I've been thinking. I want to turn the upstairs into a creative arts space, a kind of open studio. We could host workshops. Let kids come in from different neighborhoods, give them a shot at something big." He looked at her in surprise. "You do that? I can fund 100 things that never touch anyone real. Or I can start something that matters. And you want me involved. I want you running it with me," she said. "You've got vision, you understand people, you could hire the right team, build it into something sustainable." Ellie leaned against Damon's shoulder. "Can I help too?" Audrey grinned. "Only if you agree to be our honorary director of imagination." "I accept." Damon's throat tightened. "You're serious about this?" "I don't half finish anything," Audrey said. "Besides, I've never really built something with someone, not like this." He turned toward her. "What about the board?" "Your investors. They'll listen to me. They always do," she said, her voice calm, certain. "But this isn't about them, this is about us." He didn't answer right away. The wind stirred her hair across his shoulder. He brushed it back gently, then kissed her temple. "I'm in." All of it. The next few weeks passed in a blur of meetings, permits, and brainstorming sessions. Audrey's team set up the legal framework for the new initiative, while Damon sketched ideas for interactive installations and art corners. Ellie insisted on a reading fort and a wall for painting murals. Audrey made sure both were added to the budget. They worked side by side every day, and every night they came home together. Audrey moved into Damon's apartment temporarily, though she quickly began referring to it as our place. She didn't redecorate, didn't rearrange his cabinets, she just made space for herself without taking anything away. Ellie adored her even more for it. One evening, as Damon tucked Ellie into bed, she looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Is Audrey staying forever?" He smiled. "Why do you ask?" "Because she makes pancakes funny, and she laughs at your jokes even when they're not good." He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "She's staying forever." A few days later, Audrey pulled Damon aside during a quiet moment in the new upstairs studio. The drywall had just gone up, and the place smelled of fresh paint and promise. "I want to ask you something," she said, her voice nervous for the first time in weeks. He set down the measuring tape. "Okay." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, not the typical kind, not a ring. Inside was a single key, gold, engraved with a tiny dragon on the handle. "This is for the place on East 17th, she said. "It's an old brownstone I bought years ago. I was going to flip it, but I never touched it. I want us to live there, all three of us." He stared at the key. "You want us to move in together? I want us to start something permanent," she said quietly. "No more in-betweens." He took the key, closed the box, and held her face in his hands. "I didn't think I'd ever have a second chance at this." "You didn't get a second chance," she said. "You created one." He kissed her then, slow and certain, surrounded by the beginnings of the life they were building. They moved into the brownstone by spring. Audrey filled the sunroom with plants and sketch pads. Damon built a bookshelf that stretched from floor to ceiling. Ellie got the attic, which they transformed into a wonderland of twinkle lights, beanbags, and every book she could dream of. They opened the community studio that summer. Hundreds showed up. Parents, kids, teachers, artists. The space buzzed with energy. A girl from the Bronx sold her first painting. A 10-year-old boy with autism built a sculpture that made the local paper. They called it the Lighthouse Project. Audrey said it was Damon's idea. Damon said it was Audrey's heart. One evening, after a workshop ended and the last volunteer left, Damon walked Audrey out onto the rooftop deck of the brownstone. The same string lights from the launch party now lived here, looping around the railing. He reached into his pocket and pulled something out. She blinked. "Is that?" "It's not flashy," he said. "But it's real." The ring was simple. A brushed gold band with a single stone set low, elegant, strong, like her. Audrey didn't say a word, just nodded, tears gathering fast. He slid the ring onto her finger. "I don't want to be a chapter in your story," he whispered. "I want to be the whole damn book." She kissed him, arms locked around his neck, the city a blur of lights behind them. They got married that fall. Ellie walked Audrey down the aisle, holding her hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. Damon built the altar himself. Audrey wore a dress with pockets and laughed the entire ceremony. Their vows were messy and heartfelt, no one left with dry eyes. After the wedding, they danced barefoot under the stars in their own backyard. No cameras, no press, just them. And it was perfect. Years later, when Ellie stood on that same rooftop in a cap and gown, diploma in hand, Audrey squeezed Damon's fingers tight. "She's ready," Audrey whispered. "She's more than ready," Damon said, and when Ellie turned toward them, eyes shining, they both stepped forward together. Always together.